Hi, what is up my dudes? It's Ariel, if you know me, or if you don't know me, still Ariel. Today I wanted to talk about the resurgence of cuteness and the rise of cuteness that I've been seeing, particularly amongst women, girls, whatever, in their early 20s or like early adulthood, but even in late 20s and into 30s. I've been seeing this phenomenon and return to cuteness, overwhelmingly so, and I just have thought it's been so interesting and I wanted to talk about it, so that's what we're gonna do today. So the idea for this video was sparked because one night I was just in my bed looking around my room, and I realized that if someone were to come into my room without knowing me or knowing anything about who this room belonged to, it would be likely that they would think that this is a room for a young girl, like maybe 10 or 12 years old. And that led me to think more about my affinity for cute things and how that has become more and more prominent as I approached adulthood and am now in my early 20s. It's just become even more of a thing that I've been drawn to, and I feel like that I display outwardly, whether it's in my room decor or how I dress. And I don't think it's just me either. I then started thinking about the rise of Sunny Angels that has been taking over right now. I've been collecting Sunny Angels for about 2 years, but I think in this year specifically, 2023, there's been a complete resurgence and more widespread adoption of like collecting Sunny Angels and even just cute blind boxes and figurines and even like Sanrio plushies and whatever other cute thing there is to collect. And I feel like these items were typically targeted at younger girls from 6 to maybe 13 or 14 years old, but they're by and large being consumed by girls or women of my age and in my age group, like 18 to 25. And I also think that's super interesting. I wanted to kind of dive into that more and I don't know, see where maybe that's rooted, and I could give my own anecdote on how I kind of got into loving cute things and why I think I gravitate towards them the way I do. But I also was curious about it on a wider scale, so yeah, we're gonna dive into that and have a little chat. I don't really do these kind of talking commentary videos often. I haven't written a script, it's not scripted. I do have like some bullet points of stuff I want to get into, but if you think that this is like unorganized or whatever, bear with me or click off if you can't stand it. But yeah, let's get into it. So like I stated before, there's been a rise of Sunny Angels, which I feel like is what really kind of struck me to talk about this more, because when I was getting into Sunny Angels, when my friend introduced me to them, initially when I started collecting them, I didn't realize that they were in fact targeted for young women. The creator of Sunny Angels actually said that they are made to be a little companion for a young woman who's entering the workforce, as like kind of a little way to brighten their day. And I think the slogan of Sunny Angels is "they may bring you joy" or something. Even though it's just a little piece of plastic and like just a cute little thing, they were created in fact for that exact reason, for women in like the young adult demographic to have like a little cute thing accompany them along their otherwise kind of like corporate or stringent and very serious day and like expectations that are associated with it. And from that idea, it also kind of made me think a bit more about kawaii and Lolita culture in Japan and how that's super prominent and even more widely accepted and much more of a thing there than it is here. Although I'm definitely seeing the influence kind of trickle down or come over to influencing Western culture as well. Sunny Angels themselves are a Japanese item. They're made in Japan along with Smiskis, which are just another blind box figurine item. And I don't find that surprising at all, because in Japan there is a whole subculture called Lolita that is basically centered around dressing and oftentimes collecting cute items and items that are reminiscent of childhood, and same with dressing, kind of dressing in a way that's very reminiscent of childhood and youth. It involves a lot of bows, a lot of frilly skirts, a lot of schoolgirl aesthetics as well. And I think that a lot of what we're seeing here in the States States or like in Western society, how we've been adopting the cuteness aesthetic and like girlhood is kind of comparable to Lolita culture in Japan, but maybe just not as extreme. But I definitely think that there's a link between the two. And I think it's interesting to see a lot of the themes that are a part of Lolita culture become more widely adopted, because it definitely was something that was seen, at least here in the West, as more of a subculture and kind of very far from the norm. Although in Japan it's quite normal for adults to continue embracing a lot of things that are associated with youth and cuteness, like plushies and little characters like Hello Kitty. But I think it's super interesting to see how it's becoming more normalized to be adopted by an older demographic in general. And in doing some more research looking into kawaii and Lolita culture in Japan, I found an article that was saying that some believe that the whole subculture kind of started in response to the rigid post-World War II Japan. And it says that the new cute style allowed the youth of the time to express their individuality, according to My Modern Met and their article I was reading, which is super interesting if you want to check it out. But hearing that little excerpt made me think about how serious war times are. It makes sense that as a kind of counter response to this, many young women and just young adults in general would gravitate towards cuter things as a way to kind of relieve that seriousness and relieve some of that stress of being in wartime and all the seriousness and loss and how frightening that could be that comes with it. And in that respect, I kind of understand why now in the West we are adopting some of those same aesthetics on a wider scale. As we approach a recession and the economy isn't great, it's not really as realistic for people in my generation and Gen Z to move out and have all these big, expansive American dream goals the same way our parents did, such as becoming homeowners, investing in property, being able to provide for this huge expansive family and stuff like that. Or at least it really doesn't seem like those things are in the scope of our reality, which is kind of bleak. So it makes sense why we would then look to cuter, softer things as kind of a reprieve, to use it as an escape from our rapidly approaching adulthood and the reality that comes with it, which is not really super promising or uplifting for a lot of people. I don't know. I think a lot of Gen Z does have a pretty bleak outlook on adulthood and what that means for us. I am seeing a lot of discourse about whether it's even a good idea to have kids because of the world that they'd be brought into, and just the reality of technology, of the economy, and the social sphere right now. I think it's all kind of painted with a bit of a bleak outlook and not really optimistic as much as it is pessimistic. So I can see how we seek solace perhaps in cute things. I think that's definitely the case for me. I see collecting cute things and like being surrounded by a bunch of cute things in my room that would just make me happy or make me smile as a way to kind of shelter myself from the outside world that can be so harsh. And like coming into my room after such a long day and being surrounded by a bunch of smiling plushies and like colorful things feels almost like a relief and like a safe space from everything else outside that can be so harsh. And I think by and large the adoption of cuteness for young adults now is kind of a mixture of using it as escapism and also nostalgia for their past, which might be associated with happier times or a more promising outlook on the future, versus now in adulthood when you're reckoning with the realities of what that is and how maybe it's not all that it was presented to be or cracked up to be when you were younger. And going back to Sunny Angels, it is kind of just as simple as being something that adds a bit of brightness into someone's otherwise bland or kind of depressing reality of working an office job or just the current state of the world in general. It honestly reminds me a lot of millennials and how they kind of had their own version of this in their memes that I've seen online about how like I'm just a baby, and definitely in how they talk about adulting. They're like, oh my gosh, adulting, like I can't be expected to do do all of this, I'm still young. I feel like it's a lot of the same themes, just presented in a different kind of way. And maybe even more so now for Gen Z, because I feel like times have gotten harder and maybe less promising than when millennials were around our age and like looking into the future. But even past millennials, this idea or phenomenon of adults clinging on to cute things as kind of a reprieve or just something to bring them a bit of joy has always been somewhat relevant. And this was made more apparent to me when I heard the comparison of Sunny Angels to Precious Moments figures that our parents or some parents might have collected. I definitely remember having aunts and like older relatives that had a little collection of Precious Moments figures, which essentially do kind of serve the same purpose as Sunny Angels do now. Just being a cute little figure doesn't really serve a purpose. It's arbitrary. It doesn't have any real function apart from being cute and being displayed and maybe giving the owner a bit of a sense of joy and also kind of a little purpose or like task in collecting the different varieties of figures the same way that you can with Sunny Angels and amassing a collection of those. And I think a lot of this affinity for cuteness has also been translated into how we dress and just present things in general through the Coquette aesthetic, which has been gaining so much popularity and traction even in small ways like the use of bows, and I think it's at like an all-time high now, especially with the trend or like joke on TikTok just showing arbitrary things with a bow on them. It's definitely become adopted on a super wide level, whether or not people like realize that that's what they're doing or not. And I saw a TikTok that perfectly kind of got into all of this. I don't know if I'll play it. If I don't insert it in the video, I will link it down below, but it's by TikTok user Caitlin, and the essence of that TikTok, basically it was a commentary on one of Ryan Finn's tweets that talked about how the rise of the coquette aesthetic and girlhood is kind of a counter to millennials' version of girl boss feminism, and how the two kind of contrast each other, as girl boss feminism was kind of centered around the idea like, yes, I'm a go-getter, I can do this and that, and I can provide for myself and make a name for myself, girl power and all of that. Whereas this now widely adopted coquette aesthetic that's super popular amongst Gen Z, specifically young women, which is kind of the exact opposite of that, which is like, I'm just a girl and I just want to be taken care of, and the idea of a soft life and like, how should I be expected to work? And even in the rise of people or dating coaches such as Shira7, which basically talks about how you can, I guess, use the system to get specifically men to provide for you and how that's how it should be. And she is widely popular, and a lot of people, especially people my age, early 20s women, have been adopting a lot of the things that she talks about, which I don't know, I just find it interesting. Whereas the millennial age would be more of the idea of who needs a man. Now I think that our age and generation is a bit more like, I don't need a man, but I would like a man to provide for me because I could then have the soft life that I want, and I don't want to work and I don't want to be a girl boss. Instead, I just want to be provided for and taken care of. Similar to the whole idea of I'm just a baby, which has also been kind of a take of like millennials and a way of coping with adulthood, but I guess this is just like one step further. Essentially, they're both rooted in wanting to pause on that responsibility and ultimately just be taken care of, which is kind of just a human thing as well, where girl boss feminism kind of rejected the stereotype of girls need to be taken care of, or girls can't do this and girls can't do that, and tried to prove them wrong. This new kind of wave of feminism is instead fully embracing the stereotypes of women and how they do need to be provided for, but kind of using it to their own advantage, because in reality we all know that that's not the case, but seeing it as a more viable option rather than something that they need to prove wrong. And also to the same effect of the whole I'm just a girl and I need to be taken care of, and how that tries to skirt like accountability or responsibility of truly being an adult. I think that whole I'm just a girl mentality, and even the idea of girl math that I've seen become popular on TikTok as well, are both kind of used as a way to rationalize mistakes or poor decision making, because, you know, like I'm just a girl, like what do you expect? And that also can be seen as a means to escape the accountability and the responsibility that comes with adulthood, and kind of trying to hold on to that youth and idea of being a girl that is kind of on the rise right now. Going back to the whole rise of cuteness in and of itself, I think that there's also just a need to glorify the mundane and find aesthetically pleasing or fun parts of the mundane to just get through and kind of cope with the switch to adulthood and the responsibilities that are attached to it. This was also kind of seen during COVID era, where aestheticizing everything and romanticizing your life was so prominent and everyone had an aesthetic and whatnot. It was a thing then, but now I find that a lot of women are all leaning into the same base aesthetic, or at least taking parts of the aesthetic of like Coquette and girl dinner and being a girl, because that's something that's kind of universal to all young women, I guess. Like the transition of being a girl to being an adult and the changes that come with it. And although it's kind of used in a joking manner, I feel like there's also some belief or truth that people feel in it as well. I've also found it fascinating how much it's translated into fashion as a whole, not even just people's own personal style or self-expression, but in brands like Sandy Liang, which has become so much more popular in the past 1 to 2 years really. Although the brand has been around since 2016 or even before that, they're really now gaining popularity as we see on the individual level people embracing the girlhood and coquette aesthetic. Sandy Liang herself has said, "A woman will never stop being a girl and the longing for childhood is always present, and that her work is a reflection of her past and the cultural forces that shaped a sense of self," via the Garnet Report, which is another article I found kind of talking about Sandy Liang and her brand, her background. I think that idea, she stated that a woman will never stop being a girl, has been embraced on a wider scale. A lot more people are leaning into it, whereas in the past I think there's been sort of a pressure or an expectation to let go of being a girl and girlhood. Instead, I think we're pivoting the other way to embracing it, which is something that has been more prominent in Japanese culture for a much longer time. But it's interesting to see it become more and more normalized and adopted in Western culture as well. And it's definitely something that I like, because sometimes I think, what's wrong with me? Why I am still obsessed with these cute things and have such a strong affinity for it, and am not really wanting to let go of that part of myself yet and kind of like put on the adult boots. I think that knowing that you're not the only one doing these things is also kind of nice to know, and that other people are probably experiencing the same root causes that would cause one to gravitate towards loving and collecting cute things into adulthood. I think it's kind of interesting and also builds a sense of community, kind of in the same way that the subculture of Lolita also has its own community in Japan. And I also think that there is a desire of returning to the naivete and innocence that was attached to being a girl, and the desire to not know the realities of life and love and what that actually looks like as an adult versus what you thought it was when you were a kid or just a girl. And this isn't a new concept at all. I think that it's been portrayed a lot in movies and shows such as like the Virgin Suicides, and just a lot of coming of age movies that center around young women kind of transferring or like going through that stage of being a girl to being an adult. It's definitely a common theme. But I feel like now on social media, or just, I don't know, in culture on like a greater scale, we're also seeing that translated through the widespread adoptance of being delusional, even though it's kind of said as like a joke, or I don't know, it's like a meme. But there is definitely some truth to every meme or whatever. It's rooted in some sense of truth, and it's been adopted so much, and people taking pride in the sense like, yeah, I'm delulu, or I'm being delusional, oftentimes regarding a love interest or a situation with a romantic partner or interest, and also just in general in like spending or in future aspirations. There's kind of an encouragement to embrace being delusional and kind of, I guess, going full force towards whatever it is that you wish the reality was, even if it's not attainable or if it doesn't make sense at all. And we've also seen this with the idea of lobotomy core. This is kind of niche, but it was definitely a thing where people would joke about like getting a lobotomy, or like me after the lobotomy, or like, yes, I want that lobotomy. And obviously no one wants a lobotomy, but it's kind of just the idea of being able to go back to not knowing, or just not having to face the realities and the truths of life, which are often harsh. Maybe I could find some examples of like the videos I'm talking about, but it'll be like me after the lobotomy, and it'll be like a picture of like a little cat or something, just like no responsibility, just walking through life like unbothered. And I think that all these things kind of just demonstrate or show the desire to going back to the mentality that was associated with youth and the optimism, and kind of the disdain for like the bleak outlook that you slowly kind of adopted as you reckon with the realities of what it is to be an adult and grow out of youth or girlhood and go into that like sphere of adulthood and seriousness and everything that comes with it. And I wrote that as we grow up and realize the horrors or downsides and pain that comes with womanhood, there's somewhat of a want to embrace the softer, more innocent sides of womanhood as a way to kind of counterbalance the harshness and realities that we've kind of slowly become more aware of, such as, I don't know, the nature of how relationships and love really are. I feel like at this point most young women have experienced heartbreak or have been somewhat jaded by the reality of what it is to be an adult now, rather than the optimistic look you might have had towards it when you were like 12 or 13, and watching different movies that are targeted towards young girls, such as 13 Going on 30 or Clueless or Legally Blonde and all those other stuff that kind of paint being a woman as one way. You look at it and you're like, oh, I can't wait till that's me and I'm there, and then you get there and then it's just like not quite. I don't know. And I also think that it's pretty interesting, and it's such a thing to see Coquette aesthetics paired with the idea of female rage, or the jadedness of being a young adult woman, or like being in your early 20s, and just the idea of female rage especially, and the girl failure, which is another term I've seen floating around online, or the jaded woman, and how that's so closely and intensely paired with the Coquette aesthetic, which is very overtly pink and floral and feminine and soft, as opposed to the harshness and kind of stringent dullness associated with female rage and the loss of that innocence. And I guess like the overall disdain that many young women associated with this female rage or whatever kind of aesthetic is. I don't know if that makes sense, but like I'm thinking of how my year of rest and relaxation is also somehow so closely tied to the Coquette aesthetic, where the main character in that is kind of not a villain, but she's not soft or cute at all. And it kind of is pairing the idea of the jaded or disgruntled or given up on life woman with the Coquette aesthetic. And I see this a lot on Tumblr as well, and I'm sure it's elsewhere. I just am like a Tumblr user, so I guess that's where I would happen to see it. But I often see a cute image or like a beautiful aestheticized image with some really dark or bleak or jaded kind of text over it. I'll insert examples, but it's such a common phenomenon. And if I just search Coquette, I find a lot of these images and a lot of things that have a dark undertone but is masked and covered by this light and girly and I guess beautiful and soft aesthetic. I just think that's super interesting, and also kind of goes along with the idea of using cuteness and girliness and lightness to kind of counterbalance the jadedness and loss of innocence and maybe anger that is associated with coming into adulthood from girlhood. And lastly, I kind of wanted to give a bit of an anecdote of why I think I myself have adopted some of these super cute and maybe childish aesthetics, or just like have leaned more into cuteness and really have such a strong affinity or or link my identity strongly to things that are cute. I don't know, I want to be surrounded by cute things. And my questioning of why that is what pushed me to making this video, but also in thinking about it and like reflecting on my own life and why I could be like that on a personal level. I also think it's partly because growing up I was very much a tomboy and leaned into the whole not like other girls kind of idea, and I almost felt like I had to prove myself that like, no, I don't like pink, I don't like plushies or girly stuff, like I'm different, I'm edgy, I'm a tomboy, I'm not like other girls who like those flowery and I guess stereotypical girl things. And I think that as I've grown up and become more comfortable with myself and my own identity apart from any outward presentation, whether it's how I dress or my personal interests or whatever it is, and I think that's kind of given me the room to, I guess, revisit all of those interests that I wouldn't let myself indulge in and enjoy as a kid because I felt like I had something to prove. But I think that now I kind of have made the space for myself to fully indulge and dive into all of those girly and I guess soft or flowery things that I once rejected, and I feel less like I have something to prove about my identity. And I also think that I'm able to reckon with the idea that there's some duality in it, like I don't have to be one thing as a girl, which I think is something that was very much pushed, or like I was made to believe as a young girl, like you can either be tomboy or be girly girl, you either like pink or you like blue. And now I think like as one matures you start to realize like, no, that's not the case. You can like this and like that. You can like pink and blue, you could like tomboy and wearing mainly men's clothes, which I feel like I do or I did in the past, and you can also like bows and stuffed animals and toys. And I also think that leans into that whole idea of toxic masculinity and how men can't like soft or flowery things, or some things are just not manly or not masculine. And in looking up why do I love cute things, I found a lot of threads on Reddit like confessional, and it's like I'm a guy and I love cute things, and it's like a guy is like putting that on Reddit as like a big confession of like some hidden truth. But like, who cares? Like, you can like cute things as a guy, like it shouldn't be a problem, you know? And I feel the same about just adults in general, like it's fine to like cute things. And I kind of enjoy seeing other people adopt a love of cute and somewhat childish things. It just makes things lighter. And ultimately, like me dressing super girly or surrounding myself with super girly things, I think it's ultimately rooted in me wanting to make my life just softer and more fun and brighter in any way that I can. And I feel like through self-expression, whether it's through like decor or how you dress yourself, is one of the easiest ways to kind of incorporate that. So yeah, I think that's my approach to it, and I'm sure it is for a lot of other people. I'm super curious to hear your guys' take on it. I know that this is also kind of a topic that has been discussed more and more, but I've actually refrained from looking too much into other videos because I wanted to give a true take that's not been skewed by other people's takes. But I'm super interested to watch all those videos that I push to my watch later, and I'm also really interested to hear your thoughts on it and just kind of start that discussion, because I don't know, I think it's really interesting, and I also think it's relevant for people who watch my channel regularly. Like, I'm sure you can relate, or at least I think you can relate to some of what I said. So yeah, thank you so much for watching if you've watched till the end. Again, like, not really a commentary gal, so if this was a bit disjointed, that's why. But yeah, if you like this video, feel free to check out some of my other videos. Leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe if you may. And that's about it. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one. Laters.